Okay, so I'm reacting to Matt Walsh debates a transgender woman on the "What is a woman?" question. And Matt Walsh has obviously blown up a lot since his "What is a woman?" documentary, but he has exponentially blown up recently because Elon Musk actually tweeted that documentary on his Twitter. But ever since Matt Walsh has kind of blown up with that documentary, I feel like he's kind of been teetering more like on the line of being straight up just disrespectful to like trans people in a way. Although you can not consider transgender women women, you can have that personal opinion. I don't think it's right to be outright disrespectful in terms of like talking to them and kind of just treating them as less. So we'll be curious to see how he goes about this debate. I think obviously, the "What is a woman" really has blown him up as like a creator in terms of his fan base. So I can see why he's definitely leading a lot in the whole trans stuff. But I gotta say, we'll see how he conducts this.
Hi, Matt. I'm transgender. I'm born and raised here in New Mexico. I have a graduate degree in information technology, marketing, business, and finance. I own my own home. I pay taxes. I have a six-figure job. I'm a respected professional in Albuquerque. I'm a mother. My life experience is that I'm an awesome person. I am well-liked. I'm responsible, and I think I'm pretty cool.
And I think that's a important distinction that this person made, is that obviously she's well adjusted in society. She has like a job and she in many ways lives like a normal life. Because I think for some people who really are not for all the whole trans stuff, think like all these trans people are mentally ill, screaming at protests and really causing a muckus. But I have to assume that most trans people are not like that. Most people just want to be left alone, live their life, identify with whatever they want to identify with. So it's good to see, and I think that's been like the value of doing a lot of these interviews and interviewing trans people myself, is that I get to talk to people, the regular trans people on the street. A lot of the conversation I had has been amazing, right? They're obviously just, normal people with the same things that make you happy, the same things that make you angry. And I think a lot of the times when we only see like the most polarized and extreme cases on every side, it's easy to lose the sight of the fact that most trans people are just normal people who just want to be left alone, maybe doing quite well for themselves.
You touched on something. You said something earlier that for you, when somebody calls you a man, it doesn't faze you because, you just know that you're a man. That was interesting to me because I feel the same way about my identity as a woman. My question leading up to this, you've asserted that no one would ever see me as a woman, that nobody would ever see or could see a transgender person as a woman, and yet I have dozens of friends from diverse backgrounds, women from the reservation, a woman from Japan, several immigrant women. I have my coworkers, I have my boss, my VP, my CEO, all respecting me as a woman.
So, I mean, that's obviously like a personal anecdote, and maybe perhaps a lot of it too is the whole being canceled for misgendering someone and calling them the wrong pronouns. So there may be more kind of like a fear thing that's driving that, and also just political correctness, especially in the workplace.
My family, my long-term friends who are actually here with me. All of these people assure me, I'm a woman. They'll tell me, girl, there is no way you are a man. They see me as a woman. So the question,
Okay.
How can you assert that nobody would ever see me as a woman when my material experience tells me you're wrong?
Okay. It's interesting that that's the part of my talk you chose to ask a question about, because that's not in my talk at all. I don't believe I said that no one would ever see you as a woman. I mean, it's possible, I suppose, that you could fool someone. Now, you brought this up, so I have to tell you that you brought this up. You've put your identity on the table for conversation. And so I'm going to say you wouldn't fool me at all. I mean, I see a man 100%. And I think that most people would. Now, the fact that you have people in your life who are saying to you, oh, you're totally a woman, it's exactly what I'm talking about. No one in my life has ever once said to me, you're totally a man, Matt. If a friend of mine called me on the phone and said, listen, Matt, I want you to know you're really a man, I would think that there was something wrong with him. I would say, why are you saying that at all? It doesn't make any sense. So the fact that this is a conversation to begin with tells me, it only proves the point that I'm trying to make, that your identity.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense, right? I mean, that would be kind of a weird thing to say if someone came up to me and was like, yo, yeah, you're a man, right? So I get his point, but
Even in your own mind is up for, it's something that you need to be assured of. Now, what I would like to ask you, again, because you're standing here, and so you've brought your identity on the table for discussion. So how do you know that you're a woman?
It was first when I heard transgender persons describe their experience in their own words, and this was only about 2 years ago. Hearing somebody describe things, it was a woman from England, describing her experience, her childhood, her teenage years. And it blew my mind to be listening to her, because it was just some podcast that I was listening to while I was doing laundry. But it blew my mind to hear somebody so eloquently and precisely describe things that I had experiences that I had experienced.
What did they say?
Okay, so I am honestly hesitant. I know that you touched earlier about the difficulty that transgender women might have in describing their identity, but I want to state, I honestly don't feel that you would engage in this conversation in good faith.
Okay, I see. Like, I gotta call that out there. Like, especially if at least in so far, he's definitely been respectful. At least in terms of asking questions or like not being outright disrespectful to this person. But I've seen it too. Whenever I ask questions to people on the street, is that whenever they don't have some sort of answer, they try to kind of like deflect it, and in a way, whether sometimes they might accuse you of being bad faith, but you could also admit that like maybe you don't have an answer to that question too. Whenever you kind of start like deflecting like that, it's really easy for anyone to see. Yeah, I gotta say, in that instance, I think she kind of acted in bad faith herself to just accuse Matt Walsh of just being bad faith, especially because, she obviously chose to ask this question and engage in this debate as well.
But why are you
And
here?
so-
Why did you stand up to talk to me if you don't want to have a conversation? You're saying that you discovered that you're a woman. I'm asking you how you did. That's a very fair question.
Okay.
How do you know that you're a woman?
That's fine. All right. So first of all, listening to transgender people, and it was like, okay, this is a one-off, one person describing these things. Things like looking at yourself in the mirror and not recognizing yourself. Hearing compliments like, you are such an example, like a positive masculine role model, and just hearing that and being like, it feels like they're talking about somebody else. It means feeling alone, even when you're surrounded by guys, even when you have a lot of friends, and I was active in like Boy Scouts.
And I think that's one thing that I will touch on is that, look, I do not know what it feels like to not identify with my body or not identify with like my gender. And I must imagine just like people who come out of the closet later on, like for years, they probably have felt so trapped in their identity in that once they do, they really want to express it, right? I think that's why you see maybe gay people who really identify with their sexuality. And I'm sure maybe same thing happens for anyone for years that have kind of suppressed like what they truly feel. And I must empathize that must be terrible. But with that said, I wonder also too if maybe this kind of exponential increase recently in transgenderism has also been caused by people finding an identity in that, where it's not more about they feel lost in their gender, it's just maybe they feel lost in what they truly identify with, what they find purpose in. And when they kind of find some sort of like solution, people can really start attaching their identity with it. And that goes for anything, right? Whether it be people who really attach with religion, maybe for years they've gone through struggle and depression, and once they kind of found this community in the church, they're actually like the ones who really start identifying with it and really start contributing to it, right? I think in many instances when we experience some sort of hardship and when we find some sort of salvation or some sort of solution, you find a lot of group of people really start identifying it and utilizing that new maybe perhaps addiction or identity to really start powering them through in their next stage of life. Look, this is pure speculation. Maybe that's not what's happening with transgender movement, but there is consistencies in what we've seen it in other sorts of movement, whether it be religion, whether it be people finding themselves in the military, right? Where troublesome kids go in the military and really start learning discipline and really start finding the value of the military and what it teaches them. So there's a lot of different examples in that, and I wonder if that's also what's happening with transgenders too, where now if someone does start misgendering, it's really has become like an affront to their identity, where this has been a relatively new thing for many people. You can't really just get mad at someone because if you look like traditionally like a guy and someone kind of calls you by he him pronouns, can you really be mad at that person, right? I mean, it's a relatively new thing, and changing language is a hard, difficult thing for many people, right? Especially if that's has absolutely shaped how we view the world in the first place.
I'm an Eagle Scout. I had great masculine role models my whole life, and yet I never felt like I belonged. I felt welcome and
But
included.
why does that make you a woman?
Because
As opposed to just a man who doesn't get along with some other men, or a man who's depressed, or a man who doesn't feel at home totally in his body, which, by the way, is a pretty universal human experience. Everybody goes through it at one time or another. So in what way does that make you a woman, though? And it's interesting you're telling me that you listen to the experiences of other transgender people.
Well, yeah.
But what about women?
So
Because trans women are women, you would say, right?
I would say that. Yeah.
Exactly the same?
Yes.
Okay, well, then why do you need to hear the testimony of quote-unquote, trans women? Like, how you pick any actual woman in this room? In what way do you know that you belong in the same category as them?
I know because they tell me. So here was the
You need them to tell you what you are?
women. Yes. I trust the opinions of the women around me.
if most
it's
women-
incredible. You might try it sometime.
If most women voted and said they don't see you as a woman,
See, I think whenever you engage some sort of debate and you feel like cornered, the last thing that you should ever do is like start attacking people, like, and maybe like making like passive aggressive comments, because at the end of the day, right, especially in a debate like this when there's other people watching, what you say is in a way kind of swaying or influencing the public's reaction and maybe perception of you. When you start like dissing other people, you come across as like insecure or like cornered, right? And the person that you're insulting kind of gets placed in like a higher position. And obviously in this instance, this is a little bit different too, because obviously this is like a Young America's conference, and I'm guessing that Matt Walsh is like a speaker to it. So already like the audience is in favor. I can also see too how intimidating it must be for this person that's at least bravely have come up and asked this question to Matt Walsh in a hostile environment where obviously a lot of these people in attendance probably don't think that transgender people even exist in the first place. I mean, who knows?
Anymore. Would you then relent and say, I'm not a woman?
I would say most people on the planet have no idea who I am. I'm going to trust the opinions of the people who've spent their lives with me.
So, but you are relying on other people to tell you who you are, is what we're establishing.
For context, I know you like to say, everybody's rah-rahing and supporting transgender people, and yet they're still killing themselves, etc. But I'm standing here in a room full of people applauding you and asking questions like, how can I like put out legislation here in New Mexico, you know, my home state I grew up in, to try to reverse transgenderism? Like, I'm not safe. And it
How are you not safe? You just said you're standing in a room, people disagree with you, and you're perfectly fine. So how are you not safe? Like, okay, look, we're going round and round. You don't want to answer any of the questions. Maybe we'll end with this because we're talking about womanhood. So people will probably shout out the question I'm going to ask you right now.
Okay.
But you know that you're a woman.
Yes.
What is that?
So I think in a lot of like these like instances of this and this conservative person owns feminists or owns transgender debate, like one thing you got to also consider is that obviously they're like in a biased audience, right? Where anything that Matt Walsh says is going to be applauded. Unfortunately, you know, the best debaters probably aren't going to be at these conferences to also challenge Matt Walsh as well. So it also makes these people that are hosting it look a lot more smarter. But I've also seen Matt Walsh engage in debate in other, you know, accomplished and intellectual people, such as like the Joe Rogan podcast, where I think they started talking about gay marriage and stuff, because I think Matt Walsh is heavily opposed against it. And when Joe Rogan was challenging him, he didn't really have like a clear answer.
Why should we give those benefits to a couple just because they love each other?
Well, why should we give them to a couple that doesn't want to have children that are married?
Well, we can give it to a couple that by its nature can create children.
What if they can't? Should we exclude it from people that are infertile?
Well, but again, they still are partaking in the nature of marriage. Okay,
And,
it's still
and gay people aren't? If
Well,
two gay
no.
people decide that they want to adopt children and they get bound together legally, like, isn't that the same thing?
Let me just ask you this. What would you say that there is an important difference between a couple that can create a child, a couple who's, you know, in the marital act, it can create a person, versus a couple that fundamentally could never create a person?
I've also seen some instances too where Matt Walsh is actually challenged by a student that's like quite intellectual, or someone who asks a question, and he's stumped, and he like kind of reverts himself back to saying, you know, what is a woman or whatever, going back to transgenderism. It's kind of fallbacks.
So I always have to ask the question at the end. I mean, everyone knows what the question is going to be, but so what is a woman? Can you define the term?
I think that's one thing that you have to keep in mind. I think whenever we have like debates like this, obviously Matt Walsh has like done all like the sorts of research that goes in his favor. Obviously he has a clear point of view, and he's not really willing to change it, I'm guessing. So I think that's something that you have to consider, is that how do these people show up when it comes to actually debating to other people who are well-spoken, who are used to being in front of the camera, who are used to engaging in debate, right? You know, not saying that obviously I have any ill will against Matt Walsh. I'm sure, you know, his documentary was pretty illuminating. You know, obviously it was groundbreaking in many ways because it was viewed so many times and claimed by so many people. At the end of the day, I think in a debate, the best thing you need to do is to just remain calm, respectful, and although certain rebuttals may seem like an affront to your personal identity, in this case it definitely seems like it, at the end of the day you need to show up as respectful and well-spoken as possible, because at the end of the day you still do, even in a biased audience, have the ability to sway a public opinion. Because at the end of the day, it's very hard for people to not realize truth or not realize inconsistencies, and that even in a biased audience, as long as you like represent yourself well and don't back down in a respectful way, I think you can go far. But hey, maybe I'm just chatting shit. Maybe I'll be doing a lot worse in a debate like this, but who knows? Maybe I'll try and engage in some more debates. I'm trying to get into like streaming soon, so let me know what you guys think. You guys think that I should start debating or maybe hosting some debates? I think that might be more on brand. Maybe I'll do one with a trans woman or a trans athlete versus someone who is detransitioned. Like, let me know in the comments if this is something that I should do. You already know the drill. Like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more main channel videos. That's in the description. And thanks for watching.